Hi everyone, today we are talking about the Irish Potato Famine, which is also known as the Great Famine. In the 16th and 17th centuries, England conquered Ireland and killed tens of thousands of people. The Irish pushed to Western Ireland, and at that time they were only able to grow potatoes. Since then they have evolved to other crops, but at that time they found that they were easily able to grow potatoes. In 1695, the English penal laws restricted Irish rights. This meant that Catholicism was outlawed. There were no human rights or civil rights for Irish Catholics. Two, Two-thirds of Irish society were dependent solely, or almost solely, on the potato. And this was especially true for those who were poor. In 1845, the population of Ireland was 8.2 million people. Um, an acre of potato ground produced 6 tons of food, which allowed a family of six to live for a year. The Irish landholding system was known as the main source of poverty and violence. And the summer of 1845 was unseasonably cold and wet. Um, there were also previous crop failures. These were more localized and less severe than the 1845 potato famine. As we will come to see, the Great Famine was so catastrophic because of the British response and the failure to implement proper relief. As well, I would also like to mention at this time, there were also other countries who were undergoing the potato famine, but Ireland had it so much worse because they had such a small population that the greater percentage of the population was impacted. And this was true for other crop failures and famines around the world that happened at other times as well. Um, so the potato blight that caused the famine was first seen in the eastern United States in 1843. It was spread to Belgium via the invisible fungus spores. By the summer of 1845, the fungus had spread to crops in Flanders, Normandy, Holland, and southern England. Um, and it eventually reached Ireland in 1845. It hit the Dublin Botanical Gardens, and a total crop failure was reported in County Fermanagh, and then it spread to other parts of Western Ireland, which ended up being one of the hardest hit. Um, and then in 1846, it continued to spread throughout Ireland. The name of the disease that caused potato famine was Phytophthora infestans. Phytophthora means plant destroyer, and infestans means infective. It is characterized by white spots on leaves, which become brown and gangrenous. Potato stalks blackened and wilted. It is also known for a putrid oozing mass of red-brown mucus that comes from the potatoes. Um, Potato crops were often connected by these tubers, and then as soon as one tuber or plant was infected, everything that was connected to that plant or tuber became infected. Um, the disease was spread a lot by wind and moisture. So in the summer of 1845, when it was cold and wet, um, that was why there was such a huge spread of it. It was because um, that's just how the disease was spread. And different strains of the potato had varying impacts on the different potato. So some strains of the potato was more vulnerable to the disease than others. But even healthy potatoes turn bad in storage. The Irish experience. So Ireland was known for exporting wheat, oats, barley, and other crops that were specifically for exporting. This made up about 75% of the total crops on the farms. In 1847, 400,000 Irish men, women, and children died of starvation and related diseases. Um, One thing that made everything so much more difficult to deal with and made relief next to impossible was the lack of accurate crop failure data. There were different reports coming from different places, and um, some didn't think it was as bad. Others knew it was as bad as it was. There was just a lot of back and forth about how devastating the situation was. There was a rise in crimes against people and property, including anti-export riots. People were really upset that a lot of the um, crops that they were growing were still continuing to be exported instead of diverted to help those who were starving. Um, and even though they knew that the crops were infected, a lot of people still picked out the good parts of the to eat. And ultimately, that ended up making them ill. Um, so we're going to talk little bit about the illness. So as mentioned, infected potatoes made a lot of people sick. It particularly affected the stomach and the bowels. There were various forms of famine fevers, which were responsible for 65,000 deaths. There were only about 101 fever hospitals, um, workhouses that were set up so that people could earn money to help take care of the families were also set up to help fever victims, and ultimately a fever never broke out. Um, so people became hungry, and they you could tell that someone was starving by a narrow face, bulging eyes, dry musty odor, distorted limbs, parched lips, and jaundiced skin. The most popular form of, or most common form, should say, famine fever was called typhus. It was categorized by fever, red blotches on arms, back, and chest, fever, memory loss, violent twitching of limbs, muscle pain, and progressive mental impairment. Some other illnesses that were prevalent at the time were relapsing fever, scurvy, starvation, obviously, and dropsy. Dropsy is swelling caused by excessive accumulation of watery fluid in cells, tissues, and serous cavities. Um, During this time, um, people obviously wanted to get away from the starvation and illness that was going on. So many people ended up fleeing the country. In 1847 alone, 215,000 people fled to North America and 150,000 went to Britain. Many of these people left without the luggage, money, or even shoes. The ships that the immigrants left on were not well equipped. They didn't have enough food. They didn't have enough supplies. Um, it was just overall not great conditions for those on board. As mentioned, a lot of people did flee to Britain. Um, those who landed in Liverpool were oftentimes deported. Um, this is mostly because there was such a strain on the resources in Liverpool at that time, um, with so many people who were immigrating there. Um, those who were deported were usually those who were most vulnerable, including the elderly, sick, and families who had no means of supporting themselves. Because again, the resources were so strained that they just couldn't take care of those who needed the most help. Um, and something that I never really thought about was people who died in shipwrecks while fleeing the famine. Um, and well, many people ended up dying on the coffin ship, or what were called the coffin ships. Um, in 1847, there were 117,465 documented deaths. That's just documented. So, unfortunately, Ireland was responsible for most of the relief costs, even though they were the ones who were suffering. Public works employment was set up so people can work for the money. These projects often included things like building roads, things along those lines. Um, as mentioned before, workhouses were also set up. These allowed people to have a place to be and work to earn money to support their families. And they were pretty good to start out with, but as time went on, conditions got worse. They were unheated, there was a lack of meals, sanitation was neglected, um, there was disease, and as such, there was a high rate of death. So, charitable drives ended up being held all over the world, from the United States to Canada, South America, and even a lot of some Native Americans. Um, the potato famine was one of the first national dis- national disasters to see fundraising on an international scale. Um, so as you can see, these are just a few of the um, donations that came in from different organizations and people and countries. And then this is some more of the relief that came in. So as mentioned before, the main reason why this was so catastrophic for Ireland was because of the British response. Charles Trevelyan was responsible for helping them implement policies and relief. Um, he refused to close the ports to keep exports for domestic use and to divert the resources to help those who were starving. Um, there is a little bit of controversy. Some people think that the British intended to cause a mass genocide, um, but research has shown that this wasn't the case. It was just poor. It was poor implementation, not necessarily the intent for the genocide to actually happen. Um, Corn was imported to be sold to help those who were starving. So if you're familiar with the song "Field of Athenry," the um, they sold to Valiant's corn to so the young may see the morn. That's what it was referring to. And ultimately, Trevelyan's Julie plan failed. He assumed that the economy and infrastructure were modern, and at that time, Ireland was not the most modern country. And Trevelyan was also responsible for Scotland and the potato famine that they were experiencing as well. Um, and he prioritized Scotland, even though Ireland was worse off. So, because of the potato famine, the population decreased significantly. As mentioned before, at the start of the potato famine in 1845, the population of Ireland was 8.2 million. By 1851, which is one of the tentative um, endings of the potato famine, that's also up for debate. But in 1851, the population was 6.5 million. And again, um, that's less than 2,000 people dead, 2 million people dead, I mean, which doesn't seem significant compared to other countries, but we have to look at the percentage and the ratio, not necessarily the total number. 1 million people died from starvation and disease, and um, the mass immigration that occurred led to the Irish diaspora. Um, since then, there have been a lot of um, memorials going up and museums to help honor those who had been lost and um, those brave souls who did end up emigrating. The first official museum was built in Struxlow County, Wisconsin in 1891, the Famine Museum. Um, Others can be seen at Queenstown Story at Cove Heritage Center, Skibbereen's Famine Interpretive Center, the New York City Hunger Memorial, and Philadelphia's Irish Memorial, which is located near Penn's Landing. I went back in 2014, and it was really impressive, um, and just so powerful to see. If you ever get a chance, I highly recommend it. It opened October 25th, 2003. It's dedicated to the millions who died in the famine, as well as those who found freedom and prosperity when they emigrated, that their ancestors didn't find well in Ireland. It was designed and created by Glenna Goodacre. It is 30 feet long by 12 feet wide and 12 feet high. It depicts starvation and the difficult immigration journey. Um, yeah, thank you for coming, and see you on my channel soon.